Uh, Good morning, viewers. Welcome to this third Global Oneness Festival. I will chant one Guru Stavan and one Shanti Part and one foundation of Advaita's verse and one pinnacle of Advaita verse, and then move to the presentations. I will Guru Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Paramparam. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. King Jyotistava Vanumana Anime Ratrau Pradipadikam Syadevam Ravideepa Darshana Vidhau King Jyotirakhyahime Chakshustasya Nimilanadi Samaye Kindhir Dhiyo Darshane Kintatrahamato Bhavan Paramakam Jyotistadasmi Prabho Na Nirodho Na Chotpattir Na Baddho Na Chasadhakaha Na Mukshur Na Vai Mukta Ityesha Paramarthata Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Today we are privileged to have S. Anuradha to guide us on Apasthamba Dharmasutra Adhyatma-Patala by Shankara. Anuradha is a Singapore-based seeker in Advaita Vedanta tradition. She has obtained Saraswati and latest Advaita Vedanta and learned Advaita Vedanta from S. Katirasan. She has edited the lecture series on the Hatha Yoga text Shiva Samvita, the book titled Advaita, published by Motilal Banarsidas in 2018. Anuradha has also written a novel in English titled Friendliness God. The novel explores the religious son against the backdrop of the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid conflict. Anuradha is a financial journalist by profession. We have some time for Q&A and for the last 10 minutes. Viewers are requested to type the questions in Q&A box. Over to you, Anuradha ji. Thank you.
Namaste, Sanjeev ji. Thanks for that introduction. I thank Advaita Academy for giving me this opportunity to make this presentation. Let me first share the slides. I will also start with the prayer. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Paramparam. Let us pray to Ishvara that today's session be beneficial to us and help us assimilate this knowledge, the self-knowledge. Today I'm going to talk about this paper will examine the commentary of by Shankara on Adhyatma-Patala, which is actually part of the Apasthamba Dharmasutra. So what we're going to first talk about is little bit about the Dharma Shastra itself, because this is part of the Apasthamba Dharmasutra. We're going to talk about the Apasthamba Dharmasutra. Then we will talk a bit about what is exactly the Adhyatma-Patala, what are the various aspects of the Adhyatma-Patala. Now, before we get into the Adhyatma-Patala, I just want to talk a little bit about the Shastric format in Hinduism. For example, all Hindu Shastras are divided into what is called Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is the revealed literature, which is essentially the Vedas, and literally the word Shruti means that which is heard. Smriti is that which is remembered, and this is of human origin. Now, Smritis constitute the Itihasas, which are the Ramayana and the Mahabharatas, the Puranas, the 18 Mahapuranas, the Dharma Shastras, which includes the Shastra that we are going to talk about today, Apasthamba Dharmasutra, Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti. We have then the Bhagavad Gita and various stotras, which are also part of the Smriti literature. Now, in Dharma Shastra, Dharma-shastras are divided into two categories, Dharmasutras and Dharmasmritis. Now, Dharmasutras are the early Dharma-shastras are called Dharmasutras because they're written in the form of sutras. Sutras are like very pithy aphorisms. They are written in that style. And there are four major Dharmasutras. These are really the ancient texts, the ancient Dharma-shastras. The major ones are Apasthamba, which we are going to talk about today, Baudhayana, Gautama, and Vasishtha. Later Dharma-shastras are written in the Smriti text style, which is like a shloka format. And examples of these are like Manusmriti, Vishnu Smriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti. What is a Dharma Sutra? Dharma Sutra is traditionally part of a Kalpa Sutra. Kalpa Sutra comprises of the Shrauta Sutra, which are about Vedic rituals, Grihya Sutras, which are about domestic rituals, and Dharma Sutra, which are about social rules. So, Apasthamba Dharma Sutra is part of an Apasthamba Kalpa Sutra. Sajiji, please let me know in case the speed is too fast or too slow. Please alert me. And the Dharma Sutras, what is typically the subject matter of a Dharma Sutra? It is social obligations, duties of all castes and individuals in various stages of their life, social relationships between women and men of different classes and castes, what are the kind of food that can be eaten or avoided, ancestor worship, rituals, and then what are the penances to seek in case there are any social and religious transgressions, in case there is something, some prohibited acts have been committed, how do they overcome it? Now, let us go to the Apasthamba Dharma Sutra. Apasthamba Dharma Sutra belongs to the Taittiriya branch of the Krishna Yajurveda. Its date, it's a very long, it's a very broad date. It's sourced, but it's the most ancient of the Dharma Sutras. Dharma Sutras themselves are very old, and this is the oldest of them, is what historians say. The date is somewhere around 600 BC to 300 BCE. And this is definitely pre-Buddhist, is what the historians have commented. It comprises of 1364 sutras and is part of the larger Apasthamba Kalpa Sutra. The author Apasthamba, Rishi Apasthamba, really speaking, is from somewhere from South India. Shankara, who belongs to the 8th century, this is an approximate date, he has written a commentary, it's called Vivarana, on one of the chapters of the Dharma Sutra, which is called Adhyatma-Patala. This Patala refers to self-knowledge. Haradatta, who's more of the medieval times, 11th to 13th century CE, he has written a commentary on the entire Dharma Sutra. What is the content of the Dharma Sutra? It's divided into two books. The first book deals with Brahmacharya. How do you initiate a Brahmacharya? What are the code of conducts for a student? What are the code of conducts for a teacher? How should the teaching be imparted? What are the rules for the student who has come back from the Acharya, from the school, and who is going to embark upon the life of a householder, before he embarks on the life of a householder? All that is there in the first book. The second book deals with the rules for the householder, that is marriage, sexual conduct, rules between the different castes, death rituals, ancestor worship, and so on. This is in the life of a forest dweller, that is a vanaprasthi, life of a hermit who is a sannyasi. So all that is given in the second book. Now, where does this Adhyatma-Patala come? Adhyatma-Patala typically appears towards the end of the first book. And this is, it's very interestingly sandwiched between two chapters. And it's very interesting where it has been placed. It is placed just after the chapter. There is one chapter which is on all the prohibited acts. It says, what are the actions? If you do these actions, you will become an outcast. So after that chapter and before the chapter on penances, you have this Adhyatma-Patala. Adhyatma-Patala has 14 verses. It's divided over two chapters. Totally, it has 14 verses. And what are the topics? The topics are, what is Adhyatma Yoga? It talks about the Atman, Brahman. It talks about what is the nature of a seeker? What a seeker should do. And then it talks about the nature of a self-realized person. It talks about the doshas. What are the defects in our mental thinking and how to remove the doshas. So these are broadly the topics that are covered by this Adhyatma-Patala. Shankara has commented on each of these verses. It's a very brief commentary he gives. That's why it's called a Vivarana, unlike a Bhashya. Now, very, very interesting. This is one of the oldest texts. The Apasthamba Dharmasutra's Adhyatma-Patala is one of the oldest texts outside the Shruti and the Itihasa, Mahabharata, to talk about this self-knowledge, this teaching, this tradition of teaching self-knowledge. This is one of the oldest texts outside the Shruti. Shruti is all the Upanishads, and Itihasa, which is Mahabharata, in which Bhagavad Gita and some other few texts come on self-knowledge. This is the oldest outside those texts. Shankara has chosen to comment on this text and not on Manusmriti, which also talks about self-knowledge, which is very interesting because he wants to comment on the oldest text of the two Dharma Shastras that talk about self-knowledge. One is Manusmriti and one is Apasthamba Dharmasutra. Shankara has commented on the Apasthamba Dharmasutra. He has quoted verses from the Upanishads, Brahmana, Samhita, and Mahabharata. And typically, these are all the verses that he also quotes in his other bhashyas. His Prasthanatrayi bhashyas also he quotes the verses. This is to show the consistency in his teachings. The verses and that he quotes in this bhashya, Vivarana, are nearly the same as he quotes in the other verses. So this is really a genuine work of Shankara. Now, I want to dwell on this a little bit more. Now, what is the reason that this chapter has been placed just at the end of brahmacharya, just after after a person has completed his studies and before the start of grihastha ashrama? Why is this chapter placed? This shows that in the ancient tradition, a person was given the choice that once you have completed your studies, you have two options with you. Either you take up the grihastha ashrama and you fulfill all the duties of the grihastha ashrama, or you take up a life of a Naishtika brahmachari, okay, and you devote yourself to a life of self-knowledge. That is why this chapter is given here. A student is given the option here at this stage. This knowledge is he's exposed to this knowledge. If they are not interested, they can just go ahead and take up the grihastha ashrama. If they think they have a natural inclination for it, they can go ahead and devote their entire life to self-knowledge. It is interesting to note that Manusmriti talks about self-knowledge. At the very end, the last chapter of Manusmriti is dedicated to self-knowledge. Thereby, Rishi Manu wants to point out that you can seek this knowledge after completing all your duties, in your life, after completing all your grihastha duties and others, then you can devote your time to this, to pursuing this knowledge. So our Shastras and Rishis have given both these options to people. Either at the very early part of your life, you can take up, or towards the end of your life, you can take up the pursuit of this knowledge. And for us, the pramana is Apasthamba Dharmasutra and Manusmriti both. So you can see how how well thought our rishis and ancestors have been, giving an opportunity for both type of people to pursue this knowledge. Now we come to what is called the Anubandha Chatushtayam. What is the Anubandha Chatushtayam? That means what are the four connections? That is typically every text should have a connection. So what are the four connections? First is the subject. What is the subject matter of this particular text? It is self-knowledge, or what is called Adhyatma Yoga. What is the purpose, prayojana of this text? It is liberation, moksha, or in this text, the word that is used has become a sarvagami, that is all-pervading, all-knowing, all-pervading. Then who is competent to study this text? The adhikari. The mumukshu is qualified to study the text. Of course, the text doesn't use the word mumukshu, but it is clear those who want to get moksha are the people who study this text. And what is the relationship between these three? The sambandha, a mumukshu, by studying Adhyatma Yoga or by abiding in the principles of Adhyatma Yoga, gains moksha. So this is the connection of the verses. Now, the question is that, is this text useful only to mumukshus then? What about ordinary lay people? I mean, is there anything in it for others? Okay. It is valuable for everybody. For example, for a scholar, if you're a scholar of Indology, you're a scholar of Dharma Shastras, it is very, very interesting because you can see how the continuity of this teaching of self-knowledge continues, how you can trace the continuity of the teaching of self-knowledge, right from the Vedas to the Dharma Shastras. What is the tradition? And where Apasthamba, Dharmasutra fits in. It's right at the very ancient tradition. It's a very, very ancient tradition, self-knowledge. Then what about a seeker? Seeker is very, very clear. The self-knowledge, the self-knowledge and the values that are given in this text are, if we follow them, that is good enough to help a person attain moksha. What about a lay person who is interested in dharma, artha, kama? They are not interested in seeking moksha. They are not interested in that. What about them? Is this text useful to them? Yes, it is very useful, because this chapter has, this text has two important verses on how to remove the doshas. Dosha is the negative quality defects of the mind, defects in our thinking. So there are some values that are given, and these values are very useful. They are like a combination of our yamas, niyamas, shatka sampatti, some of the values that are given in the Bhagavad Gita. They are like a mix of all these values. And if we follow and adhere to these values, we can just become very good, very intelligent, emotionally intelligent and aware people in a transactional world also. So overall, this chapter is very useful and helpful to all types of people, not just to those who are seekers. Now, let us look at the introduction to this. Like every Bhashya, Shankara starts with an introduction. And what is the introduction? He again raises this question as to why this chapter is placed just before Prayaschita. There is the prohibited actions, and between prohibited actions and Prayaschita, why is self-knowledge placed there? He asks. And he says that Prayaschita and self-knowledge have a common goal. They both destroy karma. How do they both destroy karma? Prayaschita destroys what kind of karma? Negative karma. So that is, if we have done some negative karma, then at least it is neutralized, or completely the effect of the negative karma is removed through Prayaschita. So that way, Prayaschita destroys karma in a certain sense. What about self-knowledge? Self-knowledge also destroys all karma. It makes karma irrelevant. And there is both good karma and bad karma. Once a person knows the nature of the self, nature of oneself, karma just stops binding them. And that is why it is placed right before Prayaschita. Okay, so for those who have the Swabhava, basically it's all Swabhava driven. It's your nature. If your nature is moving towards self-knowledge, then you can pick up these verses through a teacher, learn it and understand yourself. If your nature is not attained, it's not moving towards self-knowledge, then you do the Prayaschita karma, and at least the negative karmas are removed, and one can go ahead and attain Artha Kama without any obstacles. Okay. So in the first stage, Shankara says that one uses Prayaschita to atone for negative karmas, you see, and in the second stage, through self-knowledge, one completely gives up karma. So that is the connection. That is why before Prayaschita, this has been placed. Now, as in every bhashya of Shankara, there is always an opponent, a Purva Pakshi. Okay. And we have a lot of learning points in this. That is, every opponent's view, Shankara highlights them. And then he kind of he argues against it, and he sets up the Siddhanta. So there is no opponent who is either too small, too big. Every point that he highlights of the Shastra, which he wants to highlight, he also brings an opponent's view. So this is something that we can learn in today's age, where if you have an opponent, what we do is either silent them, we cancel them, or we just we destroy them. No. In those days, because it was all the so-called fighting was intellectual, every opponent's view was also highlighted, and it was countered. That was the way the Shastra worked. So it's a very good learning point for us, that the moment we put out an idea in the public realm, we should welcome and we should be aware of all kind of opponents that would have to come, and we have to very objectively object to them and counter them. Okay. Now, the first objection that comes is, the person says that, listen, doing karmas, Shankara's fundamental fundamental idea, not Shankara's actually. Shankara says that Shruti says self-knowledge alone can give freedom, moksha. Okay. So now the opponent says No. Self-knowledge alone is not, it's not necessary that only self-knowledge can give freedom and liberation. Even action can give freedom. Because what is the Siddhanta of the Shruti? That self-knowledge will give freedom, and freedom, moksha, means no births, no future births. So this opponent says it's just not knowledge alone which will lead to no births. Even doing prescribed duties will not lead to future births, and that is liberation. So you don't tell us that only knowledge will give freedom. I'm telling you that even action can give freedom. And then he says that action performed, there are two things he says. One is that doing prescribed duties will not produce any results, and then he says that action performed with knowledge will also give complete freedom. That's what he says. This opponent says, and this is an opponent that Shankara is countering practically in all his bhashyas. Okay, so he says that Shankara says no. Doing prescribed duties will produce results. Okay, even if they don't produce negative results, they will produce good results. And very important, they will not negate previous good karmas. Even if they negate a negative karma, previous births, good karmas will be there in your account. And you definitely have to take up births to exhaust them. So doing good karmas, doing your prescribed duties, in no way will liberate you from future births. Okay. And then he says only self-knowledge can approve this troika, karma, karta, and karma phala. So only knowledge can approve this. And therefore, moksha is something that cannot be done through knowledge. It cannot be done through knowledge and action. It can be attained only through moksha, because moksha itself is freedom from actions. That's what he says. So this is the first objection that he counters. Now, second, the objection, the opponent has a second objection. He says, okay, there are so many of our shastras, and the shastras themselves are saying that karma is good and karma alone will lead to freedom. Are you saying that our shastras are wrong? So, and our shastras they are attacking this. They are saying that karma will give to freedom. How are you countering that? So Shankara says, yes, of course there are texts. There are texts which are saying that knowledge will not, that knowledge knowledge alone need not, knowledge is not the one which gives freedom. Action is the one which will give freedom. But he says, but these are the texts. Which are these texts? These are actually the Pravritti Marga texts. Basically, these texts want to glorify action. They want a lazy person to do action, for which, that is why they are saying that action alone will give you moksha, not knowledge, because they are afraid that this person who is very active will become lazy. Okay, will be lazy. So that's why that Shastra, Pravritti Marga Shastra, is again and again highlighting. It is condemning knowledge, but actually its intention is not to condemn knowledge. It is what it's doing is it wants to glorify action. Therefore, it is condemning knowledge. But he says even this Pravritti Marga text cannot, they cannot negate what the Shastra has to say. And the Shastra, what does it say? That knowledge alone, and he quotes this Mundaka Upanishad, the knot of the heart is sundered. He quotes Manusmriti, self indeed is all God's. So the Shastra is actually, the Nivritti Marga Shastra is the one which says that knowledge will give freedom and moksha, and no way can these Pravritti Margas negate that. They of course keep saying, but they cannot in any way negate what in the sense they cannot prevent the knowledge from taking result. That's it. You may keep condemning it. You may keep saying that knowledge will not bear fruit, but knowledge bears its own fruit. Fruit as in the fruit of knowledge, not the karmic fruit, but the fruit of knowledge. That's what Shankara says. And then he says, he gives a very good, he says, listen, the Shastra, because 99.99% of all human beings are seeking dharma and arthakama. So there are more texts written for Pravritti Marga. So definitely they will be more. The texts which are on self-knowledge will be fewer. So there is everybody is only getting exposed to texts which condemn knowledge. But he says just ignore that. The knowledge will work. And then he quotes the Upanishad Vakya to say that the knower of Brahman attains the highest. And Katha Upanishad, having seen it, he is freed from the mouth of death. And then Mundaka Upanishad, he who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. He says all this only points out the knower having seen it is also in the sense of knowledge. He who knows, it's only he who knows Brahman, not he who acts, who gets liberated. I want to take a little bit of a detour. I mean, I want to explore this point, that this idea that Shankara has explored in this bhashya, he also explores in the Bhagavad Gita bhashya about the pravritti dharma and the nivritti dharma. He talks about it in the Bhagavad Gita bhashya introduction. And he says Vedas have basically revealed these two dharmas. Both these dharmas are legitimate. One is pravritti dharma through Prajapati, and what he calls the samanya dharma. This is the samanya dharma. That means this is natural to all of us. We will naturally seek artha and kama. And then there is nivritti dharma, which is vishesha dharma. Okay, and this is based on what is called adhikara. Only a few people seek it, and it's purely based on adhikara, which the guru tests you. Okay, it's not self-tested, guru tests you. And the Sanaka, and this Ishvara revealed to Sanaka. The Pravritti Marga was revealed to Prajapati, and the Nivritti Marga was revealed to Sanaka. And even in Bhagavad Gita, we have this very famous verse, chapter 3, verse 3, Lokesmin Dvividha Nishtha, Pura Prokta Mayanagha, Jnana Yogena Sankhyana, Karma Yogena Yoginam. In this world, in ancient, that means time immemorial, I gave two lifestyles. For the Sankhya mind, the people with the mind of the Sankhya Buddhi, I gave them Jnanam, and people with the Yoga Buddhi here means action, I have given karma. That's what they have to do. And then Pravritti Dharma Lakshana, Shankara says in Bhagavad Gita, is the means to attain, there is a Varnashrama Dharma, is means to attain prosperity. And if done with the Karma Yoga, it can lead to Chitta Shuddhi. Whereas knowledge alone gives you moksha, the Nivritti Dharma. Okay, so this is a parallel. This introduction argument which he uses, he's also given in his Bhagavad Gita bhashya. Okay. Now we'll come to the Adhyatma-Patala. So we've seen the introduction, why this chapter, why it is placed in this part in the text, and then we come to the two arguments. The first argument is that knowledge, action can also give freedom. Action with knowledge also can give freedom. And so many texts are condemning knowledge, that knowledge can give freedom. That is what the opponent says. He dismisses both these arguments, okay, these opponent arguments. Now we come to what is called Adhyatma Yoga. What is Adhyatma Yoga? Adhyatma Yoga pertains to the self. What is that? This is the Adhyatma Yoga is these qualities. It's the knowledge pertaining to self. Okay, and then the text says what is the way in which you can prepare your mind to attain this self-knowledge. Okay, so I'm not going verse-wise. I'm just taking all the 14 verses. I've clubbed them in various topics, and that's what I will be topic-wise. I'm going. Okay, so then he says, Akrodho, Aharsho, Arosho, Alobho, Amoho, Adambo, Adroha, Satyavachanam, Anatyasho, Apaishunam, Anasuya, Samvibhagas, Tyaga, Arjava, Mardavam, Shamo, Damaha, Sarva Bhutair Avirodho, Yoga, Aryam, Anurushamsham, Tushtir, iti Sarva Ashramanam, Samaya, Padani, Tani, Anutishtan, Vidhina, Sarvagami, Bhavati. So if you follow all these values, you become Sarvagami. You become the universal being, okay, which is the Atma. Okay, so let us see each of these values. So what are these? Akrodha, freedom from anger. Very similar to our yamas, okay. Aharsha, freedom from the expectation of elation. Always I have to be excited. Always I have to be happy. That freedom, that expectation, freedom from that expectation. Alobha, that is greed, freedom from greed. Amoha, perplexed, you freedom from not knowing what is right and wrong. Adamba, freedom from hypocrisy. Adroha, freedom from hurtfulness. Satyavachanam is satyam, truthfulness. Anatyasha, moderation, very similar to mitahara of the yamas. Apaishunam, silencing slander. Anasuya, freedom from envy. Samvibhaga. Samvibhaga is distributing one's means of livelihood to needy. Like dana, but more than dana. Just giving up everything for others, you see. Tyaga is, of course, giving up everything. Something like Tyaga is abandoning with one's strength all desired pleasures, present or future, and the means. This is actually, see, when the Apasthamba Dharmasutra was written, the ashrama dharma was not very, very clear. It was not very concretized. But so Tyaga here is not exactly sannyasa, but the sannyasa buddhi, giving up all those desired pleasures now and later in the future. So desired pleasure now, happiness, and later future heaven or better birth, all those kind of desires you give up in Tyaga. Mardavam, mildness. Shama is pacification of the mind. That is keeping your mind under control. This is again a Shatka Sampatti we have seen in many of the Vedanta texts. You see, preliminary Vedanta texts, we see this. Dhamma is the control of the sense organs, basically. And Sarva Bhuter Avirodho, that is that which has not to be in conflict with anybody. A sadhu bhava, not to compete with others and not to have a sadhu bhava, not to compete with others. Here again, this is the typically the sannyasa buddhi. Even if one doesn't wear ochre robes, one can have the attitude. Aryam is nobility, disposition, being without any baseness. Anrisamsham is kindness. Pushti is contentment. Okay. Even when failing to get what should be his mind is established in tranquility just as much as he has got it. Very good. So Shankara says that basically, Tyaga and other things maybe is a quality that can be observed only by a sannyasi. But Aryam, Anrisamsham, and Pushti, people can observe them in all ashramas. That is nobility, kindness, and contentment. Almost in all ashramas, we can observe this quality. Okay. And that implies that people in other ashramas can also can aspire for the self-knowledge, because they have to only cultivate this value, basically. Okay. Now, if these are the positive values, which we can cultivate to prepare our mind, what are the negative values which will destroy our mind, which will in a way prevent us from assimilating this knowledge? He lists them. The text lists them. Krodho, harsho, lobho, rosho, lobho, moho, dambo, droho, mrishodayam, atyasha, parivada, avasuya, kama, manyu, anatmeyam, ayogash, tesham, yoga mulo, nirghataha. Okay. So these are all the negative qualities. In fact, they are just the opposite of the previous qualities. So these are all the negative qualities, and these need to be destroyed if you want to attain liberation. Okay. What are these negative qualities? Anger, and Shankara very nicely explains them. Okay. It's the disturbance of the mind when beaten or shouted at. Okay. Harsha is, of course, is that the happiness when you get something that you wanted. Rosha is irritation. Lobha is greed, coveting the property of others, and refusal to use one's own when the time comes. Okay. And moha, delusion. Damba, self-display of one's own virtues. Droha is spite, is doing what others don't want you to do. Okay. Mrishodayam is false speech. Atyasha is overeating. Okay. The opposite of mitahara. Parivada is backbiting, for secretly pointing out to the faults of others. Very nice quality. A lot of us have it. Avasuya is jealousy. Kama is unlawful intercourse. That's what he says. Manyu is hate. Anatmyam is loss of self-possession. It is forgetting oneself. Forgetting oneself means getting so carried away that you don't know what is right or wrong. Ayoga is neglect to concentrate the mind. See, one of the Shatka Sampati is samadhana, a concentrating mind, a mind that's not wavering. But ayoga means what happens? Your mind just keeps wavering. You are unable to concentrate either on the knowledge which is being revealed or taught. Okay. Now, what are the various obstacles? What is the way to how does one see this Atma? Sorry. Okay. So this is about the nature of the Atma. he talks about Atma. This is these verses now. The next set of verses talk about the Atma itself. Okay, the nature of the Atma. Atma labham na param vidyate. There is nothing higher than the attainment of Atman. Okay, self-knowledge is the highest knowledge. Here, Shankara quotes the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. That indeed is dearer than the sun or than anything else. Verse 4. Poof praninaha sarva eva guhashayasya ahanyamanasya vikalmashasya achalam chalaniketam ye tishtanti te amritaha. All living beings are the dwelling of him who lies at rest in the cave, who is immortal and who is spotless. Those become immortal who worship him, who is immovable and living in a movable dwelling. So this is this is a very calm, very, very similar to some of the verses that we see in Kathopanishad, where the Atma is seen as the universe with all its beings live, big and small. They live in this in the city. And who is the king of the city? The self. The self is the king of the city. And the self is, what is the nature of the self? It is immortal and it is without any impurity. The important thing here, so for example, Chandogya Upanishad, Shankara quotes Chandogya Upanishad to say that by the killing of this, he is not struck down. Nothing can kill, nothing can hurt the Atma. And then this Atma stays in the cave. That's what the verse says. This Atma stays in the cave. What is that? It stays in the cave of the Buddhi. This is the theme that's explored even in the Kathopanishad. It stays in the Hridaya Guha. It stays in the cave of the Buddhi, as in it is hidden. See, it is hidden. Because of the Buddhi, we are not able to see our real self. We see ourselves as just the body, mind, sense complex. And at the same time, it is through the Buddhi that we can actually understand ourselves. So the Buddhi does two things. It covers and it reveals. Okay, through the Atma, of course. Atma only reveals, but the medium is the Buddhi. It is the Buddhi which actually covers our. It's the Buddhi that gives this ignorance to us. It is the Buddhi which reflects the ignorance, and it is the Buddhi alone in which we can seek this knowledge. And Shankara quotes the Kathopanishad again here. This self hidden in all beings does not shine forth. Only those who have the qualification and those who seek. Most important, what the Shastra actually says, it doesn't condemn anybody. It says that those who are interested, those who have the Swabhava, they only go and pursue this knowledge. It is in this very Buddhi that the self is reflected when all the impurities are removed. The self is, of course, taintless. It is completely pure because there is no righteousness or unrighteousness in it. And it seems an apparently contradicting one when it says that self, which is unchanging, is the basis of the changing. Actually, it should be world, not word. It's the basis of the changing world. And then he quotes the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, one God hidden in all beings. That's what he says. And the Chandogya Upanishad, that is self, thou art, Tattvamasi. This entire universe is you. You are that whole thing. And again, these verses, Mahantam, greatest, Tejaskayam, self-luminous, Sarvatra Nihitam, all-pervading, Prabhum, he is the Lord. So these verses actually describe as I said, great is immeasurable. There is neither within or without. It's everything. Okay. Self-luminous is the light of supreme consciousness. It is that which makes everything possible. Consciousness, Chit. Okay. So he quotes the Taittiriya Brahmana, Yena Surya Stapati Tejas Sedha, by whose splendor the blazing sun burns. Mundaka Upanishad, Tasya Bhasa Sarvam Idam Vibhati. It's a very popular verse actually. So both this is Taittiriya Brahmana, Shankara quotes in the Brahmasutra Bhashya. So he's quoting it here also. Okay. This is a repeat of that. Then again, some more verses to describe the Atma. Sarva Bhuteshu Yo Nityaha Vipaschid Amrito Dhruvaha Anango Ashabdo Ashariro Asparshascha Mahan Chuchihi Sa Sarvam Parama Kashtha Sa Vaishuvatam Savai Vaibhajanam Puram. Okay, what is it? It is he who is eternal, part in all creatures, whose essence is wisdom, who is immortal, unchangeable, devoid of limbs, of voice, of the subtle body, of touch, exceedingly pure. He is the universe. He is the highest goal. He is in the center. He divides. He is the city. So again, Shankara quotes the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Idam sarvam yad atmati, atmeti. This all is what is this self. Everything is this self and alone. Nitya. So we just look at the various words. Nitya, which means eternal. If everything from the firstborn God to the later, to the blade of grass, whatever is, it is there in everything. Whatever is eternal in it is there. It is this. And Vipaschit is intelligent in the sense of being omniscient. Amrita is immortal. Immortal means unlimited in knowledge and existing in all phases of time. Okay, Dhruva is firm, inherently unshaken. Ananga is without limbs, without a physical body. Ashabda is without sound. Why? Because he's a knower of sound. He is not sound, he's a knower of sound. He is the one who makes sound possible. So when it says it without sound, space is negated. In case we think that Atma is space. So it says, no, it is Ashabda. It is Asharira. It is without a subtle body. Ananga is without a gross body. Asharira is without a subtle body. Asparsha, without touch. So there, wind is negated because wind is the element of touch. So wind is negated. Mahan, great. It's the only great principle. There's nothing else. There's no other principle except the Sat. Shuchihi, it is pure. It is without any disguises. There's nothing. It has no other identity. It has nothing else, you see. And pure here is also seen as a purifier. Pure has another meaning in the Sanskrit language. It also is used in the sense of purifier, like wind or fire, which also, they are pure because they purify. Sarvam is everything. Here he quotes the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This all is what is this self. So for this Sarvam, every time he gives a value, he quotes what a Shruti has to say about that particular value. Then Parama Kashtha, supreme goal. And he says, he quotes Katha Upanishad here, Sa Kashtha Sa Para. That is the goal, that is the highest path. Vaishuvatam, the supreme self, is at the center of everything. It is at the center. It is at the heart of everything. Vaibhajam, it divides. Okay. Any separation, any nama rupa, division is basically nama rupa, any name and form is only possible because of Brahman. Okay. Then again, there are some more words to describe the Atman, beautiful verses, all lovely verses that we can use for meditating. You see, Nipuno Aniyan Bishornaya Yah Sarvama Vritya Tishtati Varshiyascha Prithivya Dhruvaha Sarvamarabhya Tishtati Sa Indriyer Jagatosya Jnanad Anyonyasya Nyayat Parameshti Vibhajaha Tasmat Kayaha Prabhavanti Sarve Sa Mula Shashvatekaha Sa Nityaha. Again, these words, Nitya was also previously used. Again, Nitya is used. Let us see what are the words. He who is intelligence itself, subtler than the thread of the lotus fiber, pervades the universe, who is unchangeable, who is larger than the earth, who contains the universe, he who is different from the knowledge of this world, obtained by the senses and identical with its object, possesses the highest. From him who divides himself spring all the bodies. He is the primary cause, he is eternal, and he is unchangeable. So what is Nipuna? Nipuna is all-knowing, intelligence. Aniyor Bishanoya means finer than that. It's finer than the thread of the lotus fiber. Just to show it's very subtle, basically. Sarvama Vritya stands pervading the entire universe. Here Shankara quotes the Taittiriya Samhita and he says, by whom the sky is mighty and earth is firm. Varshiyascha Prithivya, greater than the earth. It is grosser and greater than the earth. Dhruva, constant. Sarvamarabhya, foundation of everything. Tishtati, he exists in all. And here Shankara quotes the Taittiriya Samhita, by whom the sky is mighty and the earth is firm. He is different from the knowledge known via the sense organs. See, all the sense organs will communicate some form of knowledge, but that is exclusive to that sense organ. For example, eyes can only see, eyes can't hear. Ears can hear, but can't see. Nose can smell, but can't see. Mouth can eat, but can't hear. Okay. And so that's what it is. So each of our sense organ is only capable of communicating a particular kind of knowledge. Atma is not like that. Atma is not some knowledge which can be seen by the sense organs, because that will mean it will be exclusive. It is the knowledge, it is in fact the knowledge by which all other knowledge is known. It is knowledge itself, okay? And for which Shankara quotes the very famous Taittiriya Upanishad verse, Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Okay, Jnanam here is not knowledge, but that knowledge which makes every knowledge possible, basically, Chit. And not, but at the same time, not separate from this world. It is not somewhere, sitting somewhere in some heaven. This non-dual ultimate truth is the one which is making everything possible. And Shankara gives it again a very famous example, that he is as it were clay from which the pots and spoons and pans are made. Mrit, that example is given. He gives that example. And for this universe is the basis of this entire universe. Changing universe is also the self, Parameshthi, supreme. He stands in his own glory. He doesn't need anyone else. And then Vibhajam, he who divides himself, that is Vibhajam. All these names and forms, gods, ancestor, man, animal, dogs, everything is possible only by him, by the self. Tasmat Kaya Prabhavanti, from whom all the bodies emerge. Moola, he is the root of everything. Taittiriya Upanishad Shankara quotes, from whom these beings are born. To show, basically, why he keeps quoting the Shruti is to tell that what the Adhyatma-Patala is saying is not anything different from what the Shruti has to say. It is not somebody's own creation. It is the knowledge is the same. So that is why the knowledge of our Shastras is so strong, because all the Shastras communicate the same idea. Revealed to different people, written by different rishis, but they are communicating the same truth. They're not repeating themselves. They're communicating the same truth. Nitya, constant. It is eternal and it is without any change. Now we come to the next set of verses, which are about the seeker and a self-realized person. What should a seeker do? And what is the nature of a self-realized person? So he says, Yadidam idihe diha loke vishayam uchyate viduya kaviretad anutishtet guhashayam. Okay, so he says that despising all that which is in this world is called an object. A wise man shall strive after knowledge. So it is very clear that one can attain this knowledge only if we have, our priorities are different. If we want to seek every little thing, if our nature, of course, it's all nature driven. It's not that, anybody's deliberately only wants to seek moksha, and some people are deliberately, even after telling them hundreds of times, they are seeking arthakama. That is their nature. But for the important qualification for a person who has to seek freedom, self-knowledge, is that they must despise. That is, they must have no value. Despising here is not hatred. Despising here is in the sense they have no value for anything that the world has to offer them. And only such a person can actually focus on this knowledge and pursue this knowledge, and only that person will have the mind in which will reflect this knowledge. Okay. Then there is a very nice verse, which is basically, the teacher says, Atmaneva aham alabdva etad dhitam sevasva na hitam atha anyeshu pratichhami sadhushtanam anapekshaya mahantam tejaskayam sarvatra nihitam prabhum. Okay, so what the teacher says is basically, student, I also made this mistake of, in the past, I made this mistake of seeking the self in many outward things. I was looking for everything in the outward things. Then I realized that I have to seek the self only in myself. I have to seek the self in myself, not outside. In this body sense mind complex alone, I have to have an inward looking mind. I have to go within to seek the self. And once I know that it is within that you seek the self, then I start looking for the self in other objects. And I'm telling you, student, that is what you have to also do. So don't go looking for the self outside, in the outside world. So let's just look at the description that he says, a very nice verse. O pupil, I, who had not recognized in my own self the great self-luminous, universal free Atman, which must be obtained without meditation of anything else, desired to find it in other, the senses. But now, as I have obtained the pure knowledge, I do so no more. Therefore, follow thou also this good road that leads to welfare, salvation, and not the one that leads to misfortune. Misfortune basically is all the various births. Okay. So what the teacher has to say is that previously I was looking for this Atma outside, but now I know that I have to look for it within me. Okay, and only such an attitude alone will help me find myself. Okay, so seeking the self in external object will not aid detachment. The most important thing is that if you think that self can be found in somewhere else, we are only going out. We are getting distracted. And only an inward looking mind, basically looking in means an inward looking mind has to be found. Only such an inward looking mind can actually attain the Atma. Okay. I just want to so one has to really concentrate in this body sense mind complex. Why it says the body sense mind complex is to highlight the inward looking nature of this pursuit. Okay. So then again, doshanam tu vinirghato yoga mula iha jivite nirhritya bhuta dahiyan kshemam gachanti panditaha. So what does it mean? It says yoga is the basis for destruction of the doshas here in this life. Having thrown off these which torment beings, the wise man attains peace. Okay. So basically what he says is one should, after the destruction of all the doshas alone, can one attain peace. Okay? Because these defects of the mind are the one which keep disturbing us. And once in a disturbed mind, it is very difficult to concentrate on the self. Okay? As Shankara says, that the very Dharma, the Apasthamba Dharmasutra itself says that those who are free from anger are stronger than those who are subject to anger and passion. So the real strength, sorry, I think there's some sound. So the real strength comes only through, by getting rid of these doshas. Okay. And what does he say? Having thrown off these doshas, the wise one attains peace. And the wise one is called a pandita. Okay. So it is, the wise one is called pandita. So there's a very interesting argument here where the opponent says, see, you are already calling this person a pandita, okay, and you are saying that the pandita having overthrown, the way it is, what does the verse say? Yoga is the basis for the destruction of the doshas here in this life. Having thrown off these which torment beings, the wise one attains peace. So this person is already wise. Then why is he having doshas? And then why are you telling him to remove the doshas? If he's already wise, why is he having doshas, is what the opponent asks. So Shankara takes some time here. He explains that, see, sometimes what happens is even after attainment of, you may have understood the knowledge, but it may not be fully assimilated. Okay, it may not be fully assimilated. Some people will have assimilated it 10%, no, manda, madhyama, uttama. an Uttama Adhikari may have assimilated it must have completely assimilated it and will completely be anchored in it. So, but there will be people who may have not fully assimilated it, partially assimilated. So for them also, they need to always be alert that they have to work on their doshas. So it's not that you have understood yourself, you can just give up. You need not work on the doshas. You should still work on the doshas, because we really don't know what is the extent of the assimilation that each student undergoes. So Shankara is very kind here, and that's why he gives us what is called a safety net. So it's sometimes we feel that maybe, once we have understood the self-knowledge, it is enough to just keep it is enough to just study the Shruti Vakyas and the Shastra. Shastra Pramanam is, of course, there's nothing to, one should not deny the Shastra Pramanam, and it is that which works. But sometimes what happens, we only focus on the Shastra Pramana, and we don't focus on the sadhanas. Or else we become complacent, and we say only when we are a mumukshu, we must follow the sadhanas, we must follow the sadhanas and the Chitta Shuddhi. And once if we have understood this knowledge, we don't have to follow any disciplines. We don't have to take care of our mind. So Shankara alerts here that the nature of sometimes the assimilation can be uneven. So to prevent any kind of slippage back into your habitual way of thinking, besides anchoring into the knowledge, you keep your mind clear by just always working on these doshas. And then he also says that sometimes what will happen, he highlights this, Shankara highlights this, that sometimes the prarabdha karma will be working. It is in action. So if a person who has understood themselves, there is no agami for them, and there is no sanchita. It's all over. Just the prarabdha is in action. Okay. And for a realized person, they don't even consider it as prarabdha. They really don't look at it as anything. They just think something is happening and they go on. But the tradition is very clear, because sometimes it wants to make everything that is 100% foolproof. So what it says is sometimes when prarabdha is working out, is getting exhausted in a person's life, there may be some slippages of action or behavior. There can be. And which, of course, for the jnani, it doesn't really matter, but it may be a problem. So to just make sure that there is really no defect in either their outward behavior or their understanding. Their understanding is perfect, but in case there is any problem in their outward behavior, they keep that safety net of the sadhana there, that continue to always be mindful of these doshas and always be alert. So this is actually a very, very, I found it very helpful, and I found it very valuable that Shankara highlighted this, that, even after understanding that the question of the opponent is good. Why are you asking a Pandita to still work on values and sadhanas? He has attained this knowledge. So are you saying this knowledge is not effective, that he will go back to his bad habits? Actually, that is the question that the opponent is asking. Why are you asking the Pandita to work on his doshas? Does it mean that the knowledge is ineffective? Does it mean that he'll go back to his old habits? So Shankara says, no, knowledge is perfect. Knowledge will always work. But sometimes the quality of our assimilation will be a problem. So for that, we have to keep working on the sadhanas. And then, as he says, the prarabdha karma can sometimes play out in some way which may not be, in case, they want to work on it, they can work on it. Okay. So this gives a very well-rounded approach to self-knowledge, the tradition of self-knowledge. It's just not just the knowledge, but how one looks at it and how one assimilates this knowledge. Okay. So it's a great lesson for all the seekers. And of course, Shankara says that, really speaking, there is absolutely no question of any fear. There is absolutely no question of anything of going back. They will not be deluded, or they will not be ignorant in any way once you have assimilated this knowledge. He quotes the Taittiriya Upanishad, he who knows the bliss of Brahman is not afraid of anything. There is nothing that worries them or makes them worry. Again, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he quotes, he says, fearlessness, O Janaka, you have attained it. What is the quality of a person who has attained this knowledge? Fearlessness. They are not afraid of anything. Fearlessness here is not like, you become a great warrior or something. Here, fearlessness is that no situation really troubles them, or no situation really uproots them from their understanding of who they are. Because most of our fears are basically based, they rest on our body, sense, mind complex. Either I'll get old, I'll be alone, I will lose my job, I will lose my dear ones. So all those fears are essentially resting on this body, sense, mind complex. So the person who has understood themselves, they really have no such fear. And again, he quotes the Mahabharata, for the knowers, there is no fear therefrom. Okay. Then there is another verse which he uses. Tam yo nishthet sarvatra pradvam chasya sadacharet durdarsham nipunam yukto yaf pashyet sa modeta vishtape. He who meditates on him and everywhere and always lives according to his commandments, and he who full of devotion sees him who is difficult to be seen and subtle will rejoice in heaven. So what is this? What does he say? That person who has understood this hard to understand knowledge will revel in his self, and that is heaven. For the person who has understood himself, the freedom and the sense of freedom and happiness. I mean, I'm using these words, happiness and all in inverted commas. These are not the typical happiness that we understand, object-based happiness, but just reveling in one's own nature and swabhava. That is heaven, and that is here. They don't have to go to another place, another being, or another better birth. They need to feel, to understand that they are in heaven. They don't need anything else to make them know their self and to revel in this self. Okay. I'll just let me see what are the verses that Shankara uses here to quote. Okay, so it's a very, again, I want to just highlight this words, hard to see. Okay, so this is hard to be seen. This knowledge, why is it hard to be seen? Because not because of anything else, but because people are not, they don't have the nature for it. That's it. They don't have the ichha for it. They don't have the desire for it. That's why it becomes very difficult to see this knowledge, because essentially it is that. And it is difficult to be seen because it is not to be seen in the usual manner in which we see any knowledge. Okay, we see any knowledge, we understand any knowledge as only something outside of us. But this is to understand that this is just me, not this body, sense, mind complex. I am this Atma is a very, very paradigm shift, really speaking, and that makes it very hard because we have a lot of notions about ourselves, our relationship with God, our relationship with the universe, our relationship with our body. So we have to really overcome all these relationships and look at the self and understand what the self. And that is why it is very, very hard to understand. Okay. And then he says, who is this yogi? Nipunaha. The Nipunaha, that is the person who understands this knowledge, is the one who will directly perceive it, okay? Will directly perceive it by great skill in samadhi as I am the self, okay? And such a person, see, previously Shankara says that once you, I'll go back to that verse again. The first, when you remove all the doshas, see, when the first 14 verses, the first 14, last 14th verse is basically what the things that are the positive qualities. So that positive quality leads to what he calls a samadhi. And samadhi over here means samadhi is actually a pure mind, a mind without any disturbance, a mind which is without any distractions. Okay, and a mind which is which is closest. It's like ready and ripe to understand the self. So in such a mind, the self knowledge automatically highlights. It automatically gets reflected, and they revel in themselves, and this is heaven for them. Okay, Okay, now let's go to another verse, verse 9. And he says, Atman Pashyan Sarva Bhutani Na Muhye Chintayan Kavihi Atmanam Chaiva Sarvatra Yaf Pashyet Vai Brahma Naka Prishthe Virajati. So what does he say? That the person, that Brahmana, who is wise, Brahmana here is a seeker basically, who is wise and recognizes all creatures to be in the Atman, who is pondering thereon, does not become bewildered, and who recognizes the Atman in every created being, shines indeed in heaven. So what Shankara says is that the self-realized person is not just having a book knowledge. It's not that he just, he just understood Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. He's not like a parrot, or it's not a bookish knowledge. First of all those negative qualities have been removed. The mind is in samadhi state. It is really perfectly in laya. And then when the knowledge is revealed and exposed to them, they are immediately anchored themselves to this knowledge. And such a person is no more deluded. And what is the knowledge? And they see themselves as what? The infinite. They see themselves as infinite and in everything. I am the infinite and I am in everything. I am the Atma, and everything around me is also Atma. Not that I am alone Atma. Everything is me, and I am in everything, and everything is in me. So he is anchored in this reality, and there is no more any delusion. He is not going to make the mistake of thinking himself as this limited body, mind, sense complex. And Shankara quotes the Isha Upanishad here. There, what illusion? What is the illusion there for such a person? There is no going back for such a person. The highest heaven, as Shankara says, I just quote his verse. Delusion, moha, does not disappear simply by a view arising out of words. It's not just that, just because somebody, if I keep repeating, Aham Brahmasmi, doesn't mean that I've actually seen myself. You have to be anchored in that knowledge. You have to constantly see yourself as that. For he who at the time of dealing with the world keeps restrained in yoga, yukta, and sees the one who has entered into all beings, he indeed is Brahman, a man of Brahman in the highest heaven at the zenith in Brahman. He sees himself as Brahman, this whole universe as Brahman, and he anchors himself in this. In everything, not just as a bookish knowledge, but in all his transaction. As he lives this world, he is anchored in this knowledge. Okay, and that's the way the lakshana of a self-realized person. And then, of course, he's glorious because he knows everything. So Isha Upanishad, he quotes that, there what illusion? There is no illusion for such a person. Okay, that's what he says. Then, let's see what else are there. Okay, I'll come back to this verse. I'll just stop. What are the various chapters? Maybe I'll just go back again, because I think I want to again highlight the various doshas that Shankara talks we have to remove, because we started at the very beginning. I want to again highlight them because they are very, very valuable in our understanding of the self. So what are the positive qualities that we have to create? Again, I will highlight again. Once again, I'm trying to highlight this because this is the core of the Atma, the sadhana that we need to have to get a pure mind. Once the mind is pure, the knowledge just reveals itself. It's the easiest thing to actually understand. So what is it? Akrodha, freedom from anger. Aharsha, freedom from the expectation of elation. Alobha, freedom from covetousness. Amoha, freedom from perplexity. Adambaha, freedom from hypocrisy, adrohaha, freedom from hurtfulness, satyavachanam, truthfulness, anatyasha, moderation eating, apaishanam, silencing slander, anasuya, freedom from envy, samvibhaga, distributing one's means of livelihood to the needy, tyaga, giving up, abandoning with one's strength all desired pleasures, present or future, and the means to them, mardavam, gentleness, shama. Now, shama and dhamma, if you notice, are there in the shatka sampati. You see, all our texts, our Vedanta Shastras, they give the shatka sampati. Okay, what are the shatka sampati? Shraddha, Uparama, Titiksha, Shama, Dhamma, and Samadhana. So Shama, Dhamma are very important. Shama is basically the controlling the mind, that is understanding, not letting the mind get distracted, or not distracted, not getting the mind move away from what it away from what is right and wrong, and controlling of the sense organs is basically Dhamma. So both these are needed. Both these are needed. Shama and Dhamma are both needed. For Shama, you have basically particular sadhanas that are targeted towards the mind, knowledge, meditation, and so on. And Dhamma, the pacification of keeping the exterior organs, sense organs under control. For them, you have a lot of gross sadhanas. That is why we have things like tapas, fasting, mauna vrata, so that you know how to control your sense organs. Because sense organs are more powerful than the mind, and they can really derail a person. Although the mind is more powerful than the mind, than the sense organs can also pretty much derail. When the information is received through our sense organs, we can quickly react to them, and they can create a lot of havoc. So a lot of sadhanas in the Hindu tradition are targeted towards attaining Shama and Dhamma. So this is later Vedanta texts talk a lot about them, and this text also highlights quite a bit. Then Sarva Bhutair Avirodho, that is not to be in conflict with anybody, not to cause pain to anyone. And then Aryam is nobility without any baseness. Let me just see how Shankara quotes, describes them. It's very, very interesting. He describes them. Yeah. Disposition of the noble without any baseness. And then unresumption is cruelty. And contentment is what? Even when failing to get what one should be his mind is established in tranquility just as much as he has got. Okay. And then Tyaga, I think we did that. No, later we'll have. Yeah. Tyaga is basically abandoning with one's strength all desired pleasure, present or future, and the means to them. In fact, that is one of the other qualities that is there, which is vairagya. Later we talk about that vairagyam. That is, you don't have a desire for any pleasure, this and iha and later. You see, whether it's heaven or on earth, no pleasure is can tempt you. You really have no value for any of those pleasures. That's what he says. And then I'll just pushti is contentment, and basically that's what it is. Okay, so now let me go to the last slide, which was basically I wanted to highlight what are the texts, what are the texts that Shankara has quoted in this Upanishad: Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, Kathopanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Taittiriya Brahmana, Taittiriya Samhita. Both this Taittiriya and Brahmana and Samhita, he quotes them quite in the Brahmasutra Bhashya. And here also he quotes them. And then Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, Manusmriti. all these Mahabharata, Manusmriti, he always keeps quoting them in all his bhashyas. So you can see pretty much a very common trend. Sanjeev, can I take some, are there any questions, or is there anything else that we need?
It seems that there is only one question so far which has arisen. Few people want to know the reference books for this particular representation or these particular aspects of Apasthamba, Dharmasutra, Apasthamba Dharmasutra.
Okay, see the one text that is very, very, I mean, I can just write it down. That in English, the text that is there is the chapter. The chapter of the self, Trevor Leggett, basically.
Okay, Trevor Leggett.
So he has given a commentary in English. This is there, and then of course Patrick Olivelle has he has written a book on all the Dharmasutras. Yes. Okay. So we can look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really fantastic presentation. It covered entire spectrum of the life for a seeker of spirituality as well as the Grihastha-ashrami. It is a marvelous combination of the same code of conduct for the people who are interested in the Grihastha-ashram as well as in Sannyasa-ashram. Having personal emancipation, reaching Brahman as a personal emancipation, and having the goal of robust society where a harmonious and cohesive society also comes forward. It's a common thread of the code of conduct for both the robust society as well as the personal emancipation. It is really fantastic. It covers everything of the spectrum of pure Advaita Vedanta as well as the social cohesion. It's fantastic. Very good.
Okay. So I think one of the comments says, Nitinji says that Shankaracharya most probably chose to comment on the Apasthamba Dharma Sutra than Manu, because it was his own Swashakha. Yes, of course, he's partial to his Swashakha, we know. That is there, definitely.
He quotes the Taittiriya Upanishad more frequently.
Yes, it is there, definitely. But also it is the older of the, definitely it is older of than Manusmriti also. So he wants to choose that. Manusmriti he quotes everywhere, actually, in all his Dharma Shastras he quotes, but the commentary he has chosen to write on this Adhyatma-Patala is really, really because of that. And then there's one more.
It was in lighter vein, I suppose. It was in lighter vein.
Yeah. No, definitely, it's correct. It is. One Swashakha is, it's fine.
At his level, so and upper and parabhava is not there. So there is no question. The person who can think of the opponent to the maximum extent, the Purva Pakshi to the maximum extent, he cannot have that much of rigid mindset of Swashakha and of Parashakha.
Okay, sorry, there was a little slow. Sorry, I wasn't able to see the messages. It is fast.
Instead of putting it on all available, I just tried to put it to you.
Unfortunately, when the presentation was going on, I was not able to see the messages. Otherwise, I would have.
I think this presentation was for the persons or group of people who had little bit background of the Vedanta philosophy and the cohesion or principles of Dharmasutras. Unless you had some basic understanding, yes, obviously it was faster. For those who had some basic understanding of all those Upanishads and other words, obviously it was very good, excellent.
Okay, so let me just look at some more messages. Anything else that? So, since we have some time, I thought I can just do a short meditation so that there is a little bit of a takeaway from what we are doing. So if we have some time, I will just do a short meditation. And what we can do is that whatever basically, the meditation is basically what we have studied, what we have learned today based on this knowledge. We will try to see that we are able to assimilate this knowledge and recollect what we have understood here. Okay, so I would request you to, each one of you, to just take up any comfortable position And just keep your back straight, your feet firm on the ground, and think of something or someone you love and bring a smile on your face, and prepare yourself for this meditation, and see yourself as a person who is seeking a pure mind. And in this pure mind, the values which will be reflected are a mind which is free from anger. Visualize the time, the things that make you angry, and see yourself free from those things that make you angry. Visualize the things that make you excited, makes you get carried away, and see yourself not dependent on them. Now, bring your attention on the things that irritate you. Visualize at least 2 things that irritate you, and see yourself free from those irritations. Let those irritations not have the capacity to disturb you. Visualize yourself greedy about something. Now, see yourself not wanting to be greedy about that thing. Recollect an instance where you said a lie. Ask yourself why you uttered that lie. Now, see yourself speaking the truth instead of that lie. Visualize yourself eating without any moderation. Now, visualize yourself eating in moderation, even if many things are kept in front of you. Recollect an instance where you may have been jealous of someone. Ask yourself, why were you jealous? Now, see yourself free from jealousy. See yourself sharing all the good things and the things that you value with others. Visualize the joy on their faces. Visualize yourself as a straightforward person. Visualize yourself that your speech, your thought, and your actions are in line with each other. Visualize yourself as calm. Visualize yourself as gentle. Visualize yourself as noble. Now, visualize that in this pure mind of yours, you are able to assimilate the knowledge that you are the pure Satyam Jnanam Anantam Atma. Just observe the silence. Putting your hands together, we'll say the closing prayers. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I once again thank Advaita Academy for giving me this opportunity to share this wonderful knowledge. And thank you so much, Sanjeevji, for allowing me this opportunity.
It was fantastic.